good spacing, and I'm glad to see you're all wearing masks. And then also to give me the sound system, because as you undoubtedly figured out over the last several weeks, it's difficult to talk through a mask for a long period of time, especially when you're trying to address a group of folks. So I understand it's your first day back, right? Are you glad to be back? Yes. Yeah. That's, when I talk to some of our students and I ask them, are you ready to come back? They say yes. They say that they, at first the novelty of being back home was good, but then there's some things that kind of came up. And anyway, they're all ready to get back and be back on campus. And we hopefully will be able to do that successfully. I know you're kind of in the same boat. Again, my name is Craig Aarhus. I am on the band staff at Mississippi State. I've been a band director now for almost 20, I can't remember, 19, 20 years, somewhere like that. I've been in Mississippi since 2003, but my home state is Alabama. I grew up not too far down the road in Sylacauga. My family still lives there, and so I get from time to time, I get to go over there and see them. At Mississippi State, I'm one of the directors of the Maroon Band program. We have a large marching band, concert bands, jazz band, all different kinds of things. And we, like you, are in a situation where we're not exactly sure what the season's going to look like. And so as we're trying to plan those things out, obviously information changes and we're not exactly sure what we're going to be doing from day to day. Something we plan today could be changed tomorrow because of something else that happens. But even so, we know that this aspect of our band program and this aspect of your band program are critical. Directors invest in their programs in a number of ways, okay? They invest in first of all, their time. They invest their time in you, teaching you, giving you different things to do musically and socially to help you have a good experience. They invest the school's resources in purchasing music, purchasing instruments, purchasing a show, teaching all of that to you. And I think all that stuff is necessary for a successful program. But I also really think that investing in leadership is a very wise thing to do for a band director. And I don't have the market on leadership presentations. I absolutely don't. What I present to you today, if you've been to something like this before, you might hear some things that are similar. You might hear some things that are different. Because what I'm going to share with you is should not be considered as the only way, not the gospel truth or anything like that as it relates to leadership. It is just some things that I've learned and internalized and used with my students through the years. And I think it's useful in a variety of applications, whether it's a large college band in the SEC or a large high school band in Alabama. I think the applications are very similar. So the basic outline today is we're going to first talk about some ways of some important traits that I think you should have as a leader, as an individual, as a person who says to himself or herself, I have been designated a leader. What are those traits, qualities that we want us to all have? And then the next part we're going to talk about is how to use those individual leadership traits in a group setting. Because all of the individual stuff that you may know is not going to be very important if you don't have the skills to use it in a group. Okay? So those are the things we're going to talk about to begin with. Now, I've just realized that one thing that I needed to give to you, I've left in my car. And I just looked, I thought it was in my bag, but it's not. It's in my car. And so perhaps Ms. Green or Mr. Brandenburg might be willing to go to the parking lot and assist. It's a silver Camry. It's just parked right outside the Fine Arts Building. And in the back seat, I believe, is a folder of handouts. It's got Pinson Valley on the front of it. Should be just on the seat. So my apologies for that. So I thought too, while we were doing this, have you found yourself, as you're getting ready to go back to school, have you found yourself like really considering what your mask game is going to be? Have you like purchased some like, oh, that looks good with this, or that, or are you just basically wearing whatever you got? Well, I've got a few here, And I thought I'd share them with you because I do think that there are a lot of different options here for you to consider. Okay, I didn't see anybody wearing this. Anybody wearing this mask? Don't wear this mask. This is a mask I found at the band hall from when we were doing a project a few years ago. It looks like it would be helpful, but when I wore it for a day around the office, what I found is that my face, it pulled so closely to my face that I looked like a trumpet player that's been playing too hard, you know what I mean? You know, their ring around their lips. That's what I found. So I don't recommend this one. The one that I'm wearing is actually one that a member of our church made. She made several. And then she also made in different patterns here with the American flag on it. These are kind of my go-tos. These are my favorites because they fit well around the ears. Overall, that's pretty good. I don't see anybody using a neck gaiter either. Is anybody here, you know what I'm talking about? The ones that are on the neck you pull up and down? Yeah, we're going to get those for our band. And then we're actually about to do these too. This might be a fundraiser you guys can look at. This is our band uniform, our band coat on a mask. And so we're going to sell these to fans, alumni, people like that want them. But we're going to give our kids something else. So you got to be thinking about that because, you know, you want to have a good-looking mask, I guess. That's just another fashion accessory that we're all going to have to deal with right now. So what I want you to think about now is I want you to think about where in your life you have already experienced leadership. So my guess is you're a part of other groups, other organizations, and you've probably been exposed to leadership in some way, right? So I want you to think about where are some of the places that you have personally experienced leadership. Go ahead and just call one out. Something comes to mind. Nobody wants to be first, I get that. But where's some place that you've experienced leadership?
I'm the president of our First Priority Group.
You're a president of First Priority Group. Would you mind helping hand these out? Okay, so that's an organization, a club?
It's basically Bible study on Wednesdays before school.
Okay, so how many of you are part of an organization other than band on a campus or in the community? Okay? Yeah, so when you're a part of an organization, you've experienced leadership either yourself as a president or you observed it in others. Who are some of the people that do that? The officers, maybe people who have been in the organization a little bit farther, right? Where's another place? That's a good example. Where's another place that you have experienced leadership in your life? At work. Just curious, how many people in here work part-time? Yeah, a lot of you work part-time. And when you're at work, who are some of the people that demonstrate leadership to you? The manager, right? Shift leader, boss, maybe even somebody who's been in that job a little bit longer than you, right? Where else? We've got clubs, we've got work. Where else? Don't overthink it. Somebody says something? How about, go ahead.
My siblings are both autistic, so I have to deal with that.
So in your family?
Yes, sir.
That's another good place where hopefully we have experienced leadership in some way. Whether it's a situation like yours where you're providing specialized care for siblings, or just in general, when we look to folks like our parents, our grandparents, our extended family, our older siblings, although sometimes it doesn't feel like older siblings have our best interests at heart, right? But our families are certainly an important part of our lives and the type of leadership they provide. What else? Sports. And we'll broaden that out a little bit to school in general. So in school, who do we look to for leadership? Your teachers, your coaches, your principal, your administrators, maybe even student council people, seniors, people who've been around, all that sort of stuff. Thank you very, very much. So, and certainly school is another place we've experienced leadership. There's one other place that I think you may or may not get it just because it's supposed to be a place we look to for leadership, but it doesn't always work that way. Well, church is another good one. It's not the one I was talking about, though. Yes, if you go to church, hopefully you've experienced leadership in your church through the pastor, the youth pastor, the worship leader, older youth members, but that's certainly another good place where many of you may experience leadership. The one that I was thinking about that should be but isn't always is government. You know, you're supposed to be able to look to our local leaders, our state leaders, and many of them do provide that leadership, but sometimes they fall short. But government is a place that we ought to be able to look to for leadership, especially in difficult times. So as we're talking about all of these things, all of these places where you may have experienced leadership, now what I'd like for you to do is to go back and think of one leader in one of those categories or another, one leader that you admire. Okay? A specific person, first name, last name, somebody that you know. Okay? It could be someone from school, someone from church. It could be someone from work, someone from a sports team, anybody like. Has everybody got somebody in their mind that they're thinking of, a specific person? Okay, so now what I want you to do is I want you to think for a minute and determine why is it that you consider that person to be a leader? Why is it that you consider that person to be a leader? Okay, you got some ideas in mind? Because what I'm going to do here is we're going to go over to the fancy board. We don't have these in Mississippi, but I'm looking forward to using them. And I would like for you to call out descriptive words for that leader. Using adjectives, okay? All right, so what is it that you admire so much that you consider that person to be a leader? What's one trait? Yes?
Stable.
Stable? Good. Fair? Yeah, that's another good one. Yes? Respectful. What else? Understanding. Good. Yes? Responsible. Yes? Honest. I'm so glad you said that. When I do this activity with groups and nobody says honest, I get a little worried. Because there's really, these are all good things so far, but honesty is really the foundation of it all, I think. Yes? Selfless. Putting others ahead of themselves. Yes, very good. There are others, I'm sure. What else do we have? Determined? Yeah. What else? Yep. Consistent. Okay, good. Go ahead. Patient. Yes, that's excellent. I can think of some people in my own life that I wish were had been a little more patient. We'll talk about one of them later on. Yep. Confident. Yeah. Yep. Empathetic. What does empathetic mean to you?
Like you're able to understand them, feel and be able to work with that.
You're trying to see what their situation is. You're trying to understand their point of view. Absolutely. We need more empathy, I think, in this world right now. What else? Yep. Trustworthy. Very similar to honest. And very, good. Those very good. Similar is fine. I'm thinking of a couple others. Open-minded. That's a good one. Maybe there are other ways to do a task. Yeah. Creative. Sure. You guys are great. Yep. Loyal. Man, loyalty, that's a really undervalued trait, in my opinion, because there's not as much of it, I think, as there maybe once was. Reliable, sure, yeah. Yep.
Being like a teacher. Being a teacher.
Yeah, I was trying to think how to put that as an adjective.
Intelligent.
Intelligent, okay, that works. I'm glad somebody said that because I think that's an important one too. There's one that always comes to mind with somebody I think about this, punctual. We kind of live and die by that in the band world, don't we? Right? And most of the leaders, not all, but most of the leaders I know are organized. Good. Anything else? I think this is a great list, and I think this is probably one of the better lists in a long time. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and just I want to make an assumption right now, and I think I'll be proven to be right, but only time will tell. I recall when I did this before with the leadership at the time of the band several years ago, probably before any of you were in band. I had a hard time getting this list together. The leadership team was not really interested in doing stuff like this. I think the band may be in a different place than it is right now. And that's a compliment to you. With not, if your older brother was the drum major back then, I'm not like saying anything bad about them. I'm just saying it seems like just from your willingness to participate in this and to actually just give simple, honest answers, I think that's a sign that you guys are in a good place or headed towards a good place as a program. And I also just personally appreciate that you didn't give me any words that I didn't know how to spell. So thank you for that. All right, so as you look at this is a pretty impressive list. Stable, fair, respectful. I'm not going to read all of them, but can everybody see it? I know I'm kind of standing here. Do y'all see that? And there are probably others that we could go to as well. So what's the takeaway? Why even do this? Well, it's the first big point of our discussion today. If these are the things that you look to in people that make them rise to the level of being leaders in your life, then these are the same things that members of this band are now going to expect from you because you are their leaders. They're going to expect you to be fair and respectful and honest and selfless and consistent and patient and creative and intelligent and punctual. And at this point, mentally, you might be sliding down in your chair a little bit going, oh my goodness, there's no way this is ever going to work. Because I'm not all of these things. So if I'm not all of these things, it must not be possible for me to be a leader. Well, let me put your mind at ease. Nobody in this room, including the presenter, excels in everything on that list. If you look at that list, what I hope you see on it are some things that you feel like are real strengths of yours. Things that right now, today, you do pretty well. And I hope you look on those lists and I think you might find some things that are kind of in the middle for you. They're not really strengths, but they're not really liabilities either. And then, if we're honest, we probably look at a few things on that list and we go, you know what, I'm not good at that. And every single one of us could do that, myself included. So the first thing I'd like for you to do, the packet that was passed around, I'd like for you to take that and just open it up to the very back. And I don't want you to write everything down that's on the board right now. But I'd like for you to look at the list, and I'd like for you to write down 3 things, just on a scale of 1, 2, 3. Just write 1, 2, 3 across. I want you to write 3 things that you feel like are a liability for you, that you don't do well. That goes under number 1. 3 things that are average, that's number 2. And 3 things you're really good at, that's number 3. Okay, so take a minute and do that. Mr. Brandon. Let me turn that up just a little. I'm not sure if it's necessary. I feel like I'm still. Nobody's going to see this, by the way. I'm not going to tell you to pass it to your neighbor and let them look at it. That's not what this is about. So under number 1, those are going to be 3 things that you don't feel like are really strengths of yours right now. Under number 2, that's going to be things that you are, either way, they're not good or they're bad. Number 3 are going to be things that you feel like you do really well right now. So what should you do with that? Well, as part of this packet, you're just going to hang on to it. And over the course of the year, you need to refer to this list from time to time. And you want to try to take those things that are in the 1 column and move them up to the 2 column. Things that are in the 2 column, you want to try to move them up to the 3 column. And the things that are in the 3 column, don't let them slide to number 2 or number 1. This is what we call a leadership inventory. It's a self-assessment. It's a way for you to examine what you feel like your strengths and weaknesses are in order to develop a plan to improve your weaknesses and maximize your strengths. There's a whole bunch of ways to do this. But don't worry about the fact that maybe there are things in here that you're just not good at. Because everybody is like that. So, let's move on now, and I want you to turn, I'm sorry, has everybody done that? I'm sorry, I don't want to rush. You've already done that. Everybody good? All right, let's turn back to the front of the packet. To the first page where there are things for you to write down. So I usually put this packet together along with the presentation just to kind of give you some things to do as I'm talking. A lot of the exercises that I usually do with this presentation aren't really things that we can do right now because they require people to be in close groups and to interact at a close distance. And we're just not going to be able to do that. So the packet is just kind of to help you as we go through the presentation. But along the way, it's completely expected that I might say something, you're like, wait a minute, hang on. What do you mean by that? Could you tell me more about that? Or it might trigger something that's happened to you before, you're like, wait, that's kind of like this thing that happened. This type of presentation works better when you all feel comfortable sharing those things as they happen. And there's nothing that I'm going to present to you today that I can't stop a few minutes for you to share something that's meaningful to you or to ask a question for clarification. Okay? So if you would just make yourself known, and then kind of in a circle, so I may not see you initially, right? But I want you to feel like this is a place that you're comfortable sharing. It's a safe space. Nobody's going to make fun of anything that you say, or there's not going to be a question that people are going to think, well, that's just a dumb question. I want you to share it, because everybody's experience is unique, and everybody's experience contributes to the success of the group. Okay? So I told you the first part. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Humility. She's bringing up another one that could go on that list, and that's certainly, if you feel like that's on your list of 1, 2, 3, you would include humility. Absolutely. And that's, in this day and age, sometimes hard to come by, isn't it? Right? There's a saying that it's not unique in our office, but we say it a lot to kind of remind ourselves of this. I work with 3 people. There's director bands, and then I'm one of 2 associate directors. It's really, and it's our director that says this a lot. It's amazing what you can accomplish if you do not care who gets the credit for it. To me, that's just a real good example of humility. Because the truth is, our director deserves a lot of the credit for a lot of good things that have happened in our program. She would rather others be in the spotlight for that. And I think that's a real good trait to have, and I think she's a real good example of that. Thank you for sharing that. So as I said at the beginning, we're going to start off talking, and we already kind of have. This is kind of a prelude to the first part of the session. We're going to talk about traits and qualities of individual leadership. Okay? And again, this is not, I didn't write the book on this. These are just things that I've drawn from my own experiences that I think are important. The first bullet point that you see there is you can't lead blank until you lead blank. You can't lead others until you lead yourself. You can't lead others until you lead yourself. If I'm in a situation where I need to get some financial advice, I am not going to go ask financial advice from someone that I know who's broke. If I'm in a situation where I need relationship advice, I'm not going to seek that advice from someone that I know that's been married and divorced a bunch of times. It just doesn't make sense, because that person is maybe not a leader in that field. So if you're going to be a leader in the marching band field, basic understanding is that you're good at what the marching band does. Okay? You're good at playing and marching, preferably at the same time. Right? Okay? Now, there are going to be different degrees of success, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. But at the very least, the expectation for you as a leader in a marching band is that you are somewhat good at what the marching band does. And I suspect that probably is not an issue for anyone in this room. I suspect you're only here because somebody has kind of vetted you already to say, yeah, this person's good, they've got this skill, they've got that skill, they're pretty good. We can have them as a leader. Now, there is a huge emphasis on leadership, which I think is great. But one of the things we have to realize is that leaders comprise, in general, a relatively small percentage of the entire organization. In fact, generally speaking, only about 5% of any organization is going to be put in some type of leadership position, give or take. It could be a little higher, could be a little lower. So that means that 95% of the rest of the organization is going to be put into the category, generally speaking, of follower. Now, I want to take just a second to talk about that, because sometimes I think at the expense of promoting leadership qualities in young people, we have not necessarily done a good job of explaining the importance of the follower. Not everybody can, nor should they be, a leader in an organization. But what we have to do as leaders is to make sure that we are nurturing those who are considered followers. and making sure that we don't look at them any differently because they do or do not have a title. In fact, a lot of times you can see good leadership qualities in people that don't have a title. You may be thinking of people in your section right now that come to mind when we say, okay, well, this person doesn't have the title, but they show some good leadership qualities as a follower, and that's completely fine. But you must never look at the people that you're charged with leading and consider them as anything other than your equal. Okay? You have to consider them as your equal. So for the purposes of a group like this, student leaders, here's what I feel like is a good basic definition of leadership. Okay? So write this down. Leadership for you is defined as your ability to influence the actions of other people. Your ability to influence the actions of other people. That's not the same leadership definition for everyone in every type of organization, but I think it's appropriate for you as a student leader, and here's why. The key word in that phrase is influence. The word influence is specifically not boss around, dictate to, give orders to. Okay? So let's think about why we talk about that in terms of student leadership and how that's different. When we made this list, and I asked you to think about leaders in your own life, chances are the person that you are thinking about, whether it be a teacher, a coach, a parent, a church leader, whatever, chances are that person is significantly older than you are and has significantly more experience doing whatever it is they're leading than you do. Maybe not in every case, but generally speaking, am I right about that? Okay? That type of relationship typically evolves from someone, like a teacher, a boss, or whatever. It's someone who not only has age and experience, but also has the ability to give out some sort of consequences if the expectations of membership are not met. If your parents ask you to do something and you don't do it, there's probably going to be some type of punishment. If your boss asks you to do something at work and you don't do it, there are probably going to be consequences for that. Okay? If you're a coach or whatever, just any of those things we were talking about earlier, if they ask you to do something and you don't do it, there's going to be an issue. Your leadership in a band program is not like that. You are not anyone's boss. You are not really, beyond a basic level, in charge of anybody. And if you think about it, it makes sense. First of all, are you a lot older than the people you're leading? No, you're within a couple of years in most cases. You're a senior and there's freshmen, 3 years. Do you have significantly more experience doing what you're supposed to be doing? No, you have some, because you've been in it longer. But a teacher who's been teaching math for 20 years is more knowledgeable than you as a student in Algebra 1. Okay? So you see the difference. And the other thing is, you don't really have the ability to enact consequences for not meeting the goals. That's the director's job. Your job is, as I said just a second ago, to influence the actions of other people. And here's the other big thing that's different about this. Think about when you were a kid, and I don't know, maybe it's still applicable today. When your parents ask you to do something like clean up your room, has anybody ever, I got a kid who's 12 and his room always looks like a federal disaster area. Everybody have that? Your parents say clean up your room? When your parents ask you to clean up your room, How many times did they jump in there and clean it up with you? No. It was something like, you better clean up this room, I'm going to close this door, do not come out until this room is clean. Right? And then they go do whatever they were doing. If your boss asks you to, let's say if you work in a grocery store, if your boss says, take this out and put it on the shelves, does your boss generally go out there, take things off the shelf, put them on there too? Maybe, but probably not. But in your situation as a leader in the band, what is it that you are doing? Exactly the same thing you are asking other people to do. It's the concept, not the concept of do as I say, not as I do. It's the concept of doing as I do. It's the equivalent of your parents coming in and cleaning up your room with you. It's the equivalent of your boss going out there and putting things on the shelves with you. So you can see that the type of leadership you have experienced is different from the type of leadership you are now expected to contribute to. Peer leadership, and it's hard. And hopefully, as we talk, you're going to get some tools to go in your toolbox that will be helpful to you as you navigate some of the challenges of being a successful peer leader. But first and foremost, you have to recognize that in no case are you somebody's boss. If you've somehow gotten this idea that that's part of your role, it's going to be very frustrating because you just can't approach it like that. There are just too many things that you have to do differently than a boss or a parent or a teacher does. So it's no secret that effective and appropriate communication is very important. And when a lot of the communication that you have to do is through talking with section members. And what you probably learned growing up, and may still hear from time to time, I think is true. When you're speaking to someone, it's not always what you say, but what? How you say it. It's not what you say, but how you say it. Can I have a volunteer just to come up here and do a real simple exercise? Not embarrassing, I promise. Anybody? Okay, come on up here. Just put your feet on the line and face this way. What's your name? Maddie? Okay, all right, Maddie. I want you to, what do you play? Oh, your dance. Okay, so do you, is part of the dance line, do you march like the rest of the band does? You like forward march, left, right? Okay. Okay, so I want you, Maddie, I want you to pretend like you're a ninth grader. This is your, like your second day of band camp. And I want you to just pretend like you just got a horn up like this. Okay, it's just general horn. And I want you to give me a really typical ninth grade, first year in marching band step off. That's all I want you to do. 1, 2, ready, go. Okay. That's fine. You did fine. You actually did a lot better than most ninth graders did, to be quite honest. What I was hoping you would do is just do it really poorly. So let's go back and do it again. And purposely do it really poorly. And I'm going to be your section leader, okay? 1, 2, ready, go. Okay, see, that was terrible, okay? That was bad. And so as a section leader, now I've got to say, you know what, Maddie, that was terrible. I mean, that was awful. So Maddie's a ninth grader. It's her second day of band camp. She's probably starting to think, should I have even done this? Maybe band isn't for me. So how do I as a section leader handle that better? Okay. Somebody say, all right, Maddie, so let's go. Let's try this again. I want you to look at my feet. So you got my feet together like this. Now I got my body up nice and straight. Put your hands in front of you like this. We're going to step off together this time. 1, 2, ready, go. Now we're doing this together. And it's better. And if I need to go in more detail to help her out, I could say, okay, make sure that you push off with your back foot. Make sure you get your toe extended. They're all things I can say, but it started because I established early on in the conversation that we're doing this together. Okay? I didn't belittle her. And even though in my mind I'm thinking that was terrible the first time she did it, that's not what I'm going to say. Because when you speak to people, when you communicate verbally, it's not what you say, but how you say it. Okay? Thank you for being willing to come up, Maddie. I appreciate that. Of all people, it was a dancer that volunteered. I needed a trombone player, somebody that could have done it really poorly the first time, right? All right, so this next part of the discussion I added in a few years ago because it's just such a big thing now. And I think there are some things that you as high school students need to think about in terms of communication with social media. And I know that nothing excites you more than having some old guy talk to you about social media, right? I mean, because clearly I'm well-versed, right? No, I'm not. But I've seen enough people get into trouble with it that I think I can formulate some general opinions that'll be good for you. You think about a lot of damage that can be done when communicating on social media. And there's a few easy things that if you'll do these things, you'll eliminate most of the risk of doing anything stupid. Number one, hard to think about this when you're 15, 16 years old, but model professional behavior. Think about not just communicating as you do, like when you're talking to people in your class, but think about when you put something on social media, think about yourself 10 years from now doing what you want to do as a professional and communicate that way. Because when you model professional behavior, generally speaking, you'll be okay. Number two, you don't always have to put things on social media about your band. I'm not suggesting that. But if you do, promote your band's good work. If you're gonna tweet about band camp, don't tweet about how bad it was because it was so hot today. Say, man, it was hot today, but we got a lot done. It's two different things completely. Number three, practice being positive. That's hard to really think about, at least when I look through my news feed or I look through my Twitter feed, because there's a lot of things on social media that aren't positive. That can help you stand out if you are. The next one, avoid bad language. And I realize that I'm probably in the minority here, but I have managed in my adult life to basically surround myself with people who don't regularly use bad language. To the point that when I watch a movie and there's bad language in it, I just kind of cringe because I'm just not around it. And I know that's not the case for most people. But when you put it in print, it's a lot more serious than if you just say it. The next thing, try not to dive into drama. And again, that's hard to do on social media. And then the last thing, think twice before posting. I'll tell you a story. I know of a pastor that several years ago was really disturbed by some things that were happening in this country. And in particular, at that time, there were some things being said about a person that this pastor considered to be a mentor on social media. Some things that he felt like were not fair of this person, and some things that he felt like were untrue. And he was really upset about it. He was really frustrated about it. And he was part of a group, a private group on Facebook of other pastors, where they could go and they could just talk about some pastoral concerns. They could share some of the difficulties of being a pastor. And so he went to that group and he basically vented about his frustrations over his mentor's name being sort of dragged through the mud. And in doing so, I'm not going to tell you what he said. But let's just say that if I did tell you, there's not anybody in here that would think that what he said and the imagery that he used to say it would be appropriate for a pastor to say, let alone post on social media, even in a private group. But he did. And about 30 minutes later, he realized that that was a mistake. That he had, it was not very pastoral of him, what he said. It was not appropriate. He was angry, and he went over the line, and he knew it. So he went back to that same group, and he took the post down, and he wrote a long apology to everybody who was in the group, saying, that's not me. What I said was certainly not indicative of how I feel or how, I try to live my life as a pastor, as a Christian. And that was the end of it. Except for one thing. Somebody in that group took a screenshot of what he wrote and sent it to a local reporter who said, can you believe what this pastor said in this group? That pastor did a story, that reporter did a story, another reporter did a story, and 2 days later, that pastor's story was a subject of a long article in the Washington Post. Just like that. In fact, his story about what he wrote in the Facebook group became much bigger than what he was protesting about his mentor, which was kind of a big thing too. And all of that happened because he did not think twice before posting, especially in this day and age. How many of you, I'm just curious, how many of you are active on Twitter? I'm just curious. Any of you active on Twitter? There's one, okay, so a lot of times if you go through any social media, you can look at what's posted and you can think that that represents the majority of everything going on in America. The majority of thought in America is wrapped up in what we see on social media. Do you know what percentage of Americans even have a Twitter account? I want to guess. 2, it's higher than that. It's about 13%. That's it. And that's not people that use it every day, that's just people that have it. So you have to remember that when you see things on social media and you start formulating opinions about that, it starts to affect you in a way that you think that must be what everybody thinks. Well, it's what a small percentage of people think. It's important for you as a leader to know these things because it shapes your worldview. It shapes not only your online presence, but sometimes that online presence can then spill over into how you treat others in your section. It becomes a part of your life. So anyway, that's my little bit of a dive into social media because it's all a part of communication. Verbally, and certainly now social media is something that we use. All right, moving on to the next thing. One of these days, most of you, when you finish high school, you're going to start you're either going to go to college or you're going to go straight to the workforce, you go to the military, but you'll end up working, many of you will end up working for a company, whether it's a small company or a large company, but in some way, that company is going to invest in leadership development. Companies do this all the time. Big companies like Google, small local companies, retail stores, whatever. They all invest in their employees because they want to grow leadership from within their company. Because it's a lot easier to retain people in the company than it is to recruit new people in. So they invest a lot of time and money in this. And overall, what big companies have found is that there are 2 things that, generally speaking, contribute to success as a leader in the workforce. Okay? I think these 2 things also translate very well to success in a band program. Those 2 things are knowledge and attitude. Knowledge and attitude. Okay? So, if you had to look at those 2 things, attitude and knowledge, what percentage would you give to each of those to add up to 100 in terms of their importance? How much of the success is based on knowledge versus attitude?
Just in a percent. Somebody tell me what you think. Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? Is it 80-20? What you got? What do you think? 30% knowledge, 70% attitude. That's her thought. Now, I suspect that not everybody is in agreement with that. What do you think? It's got to be more than just one person's thought. Yep. Flip it around, 70% knowledge, 30% attitude. Okay? Other thoughts? Anybody think it's like half? Like 50-50? What do you think? You think about half? Or maybe even 60-40? Well, the answer might surprise you. Generally speaking, success in the workforce or in band is 90% related to your attitude and 10% related to your knowledge. And guys, let me just tell you, that should come as a huge relief to everyone in the room. Because among those two things, one of them is a lot easier to control than the other. If you woke up this morning and for whatever reason you're in a bad mood, you just had a bad attitude about the day because you woke up in a bad mood, the chances are that when you wake up tomorrow, you're probably not going to wake up in a bad mood. Probably going to have a good attitude because you're just going to wake up normally and go about your day. Right? It's not a long-lasting thing. But if you woke up this morning and you play the trumpet and you're a bad trumpet player, guess what? When you wake up tomorrow morning, you're going to still be a bad trumpet player. Because it is much easier to change your attitude than it is to change your knowledge about something. Plus, knowledge doesn't always influence our actions nearly as much as our attitude. For example, how many of you wish that you were better as a musician than you are right now? Yeah, everybody's hands goes up. Put your hands down. How many of you know that when you want to get better at playing an instrument, that one of the things you have to do is practice your horn every day? Okay? Put your hand down. How many of you practice every single day? And a lot fewer hands. You know it. You just told me that. But it's your attitude about that that makes the difference. How many of you wish that you were in a little bit better physical shape than you are right now? Okay? Yeah. How many of you know that if you want to be in good physical shape, you've got to eat well and exercise regularly? Raise your hand. Put your hands up. How many of you eat pizza and French fries? Yeah, every single one of you. Even though you know it's bad for you, you still eat it. You want to be in better shape, you know that you got to eat right and exercise more, but you still eat pizza and fries. It's not just about what you know. It's about your attitude towards that makes a difference. The same is true in band. The same is true in band. Your attitude, your outlook on this activity when you walk through this door is 9 times more important than how well you do what you do. Now let me be clear about something. This is not a pass for you to not practice. That's only 10%. It doesn't matter. No, because you have to maximize that 10%. You've got to be the best 10% that you can be, whatever that is. For some of you, that 10% is going to be All-State. For some of you, that 10% is going to be, I'm learning, 3 minor scales that I didn't know last week. Okay? It's going to be different for every single person, but you don't get a pass. You don't get to walk through and say, I'm in a good mood. It doesn't matter if I do anything well with my horn. No, that's not it at all. But you can see, and you can probably think about this, and I don't want, it's a lot of times when I use this example, people go, I know, and then they'll say the person's name. Don't do this. Don't react that way when I say this. But some of you can probably think about somebody that you know who's a musician that plays really, really well, but you can't stand to be around them. And if you haven't met that person yet, stick around long enough, you will. And that's why we as band directors much prefer to have kids with good attitudes, even if their playing skills aren't all state level, opposed to having a hot-shot player that can't do anything else right because of their attitude. Your attitude is 9 times more important. Think about that whenever you walk through the door. That our success today is going to be largely dependent on my attitude. So there's a thing that I learned in a session years and years ago that I think works really, really well. And I'm just going to kind of just put this off here because erasing might be too hard for me to do. Okay, just clear the screen. Can you just clear the screen? Oh, wow. So we don't have these back home. All right, so the first thing that leaders do in this next section, because they're just kind of piecing a lot of these things together. Leaders must be willing to take a risk. Leaders must be willing to take a risk. Now, I'm not talking about a dangerous risk here. I'm not talking about going to a zip line course without a safety cable. I'm not talking about walking the plank. Not that type of risk. I'm talking about a risk that could potentially bring high reward with minimum damage if it doesn't go well. Okay? So let me give you an example from our own program. It's probably been now maybe 15 years ago. We were in a situation going into the fall semester where we did not feel like we had adequate leadership in our baritone section. We just had a couple of guys in there that just were really just sour, had terrible attitudes, didn't seem to care, and we just weren't going to give them that title. In fact, the leadership was so scarce in the section that we didn't even have section leaders that year for the baritone section. We just put them in with all the trombone squads. Because we had good trombone squad leaders. And we did that for a couple of years, and then we felt like we had some young people coming into the section that we could give the position, and let's see what they do with it. So in our leadership training that year, before band camp, one of the things we asked them to do is to think about their goals for the year. What are the things they hope to accomplish? And it was kind of hard for these new baritone section leaders because they didn't really know what they were doing. But one of them stood up and said, one of the things we're going to do this year is once a week, we're going to have dinner together as a section. That was it. It wasn't like any big deal. It was like it was just the next thing that he said. It wasn't everybody like stood up and applauded. Oh, that's groundbreaking. Oh, a meal. Wow. So, it wasn't anything. It was just the next thing. Well, so they did it. And every week, the baritones had dinner somewhere in Starkville on Thursday night. And they made sure that everybody came as best they could. And even if people didn't eat, they still wanted them to come and hang out. And it was very successful. In fact, it was so successful that the next semester, after marching band was over, they kept doing it. They kept meeting. And then a funny thing happened the next year. Except for the students in that section that graduated, every single baritone player returned to band the next year. Nobody quit. It was unreal. We couldn't believe it. And it took us, as we thought about this, we were like, well, at the time we didn't realize what it was. Like, well, gosh, baritones, man, they've gone from worst to first in like 3 years. What is it? And then that section leader is the one that told us what it was. He said, yeah, I think it was the dinner that helped. Like, what do you mean? He said, well, we had dinner all year. It was great. We all got together and they told us about all the stuff that I just told you. And now, 12, 13 years later, after they first did that, guess what? The baritone section still gets together once a week during the year and has dinner together. It's now one of their most closely held traditions as a section. And all of that was because the leadership in that section was not afraid to take a risk. That's the type of risk you need to think about when you're leading your groups. What kind of risk could we take that would make our section potentially better, but not cost us anything if it doesn't work? What's the downside of eating dinner together? Is there a downside? I mean, how many good times in your life are in some way related to a meal? When your family gathers for Christmas, do they gather at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon? No, they gather at lunch. They gather at dinner. Because so many good things happen around food, around meals. So that was an easy risk for them to take. They didn't even realize it. They had no idea. They were just going to get together and have dinner. But it ended up being something 12, 13 years down the line. The baritone players are still doing it. And none of them have any idea how it started. Because it's been that long. It just doesn't matter. They're like, oh yeah, baritone dinner. You know how that started? I have no idea. They know no clue. No clue at all. One of the things that I want you to do at some point this week or next is I want you to think about a risk you could take. You and your fellow section leaders get together. All right, what could we do? It could potentially make our section better, but not cause us any problems if it doesn't go well. If the baritone dinner hadn't gone well, they'd be like, well, okay, well, I had dinner. Guess we'll do something else. No big deal. Leaders must be willing to take a risk. Okay, the next thing. Leaders must be willing to acknowledge the role that other people play. Acknowledge. This goes back to something I said at the beginning of the session. We're talking about humility. It's amazing what you can achieve when you don't care who gets the credit for it. There's some people who are really driven to success by the recognition, the acclamation. But if you don't mind acknowledging the role that other people can play, your path to success, I think, is going to be easier. And let me give you an example that I think that might resonate with some of you, just depending on your section. And this is your first day back, so you may not have met everybody, especially the new people, is that probably right? So you don't even know who they are. But you probably know some of the people who are coming back, right? And you might even be able to think of somebody in your section right now who thought that they would be in this room right now, but they aren't. Right? I mean, can you think of somebody maybe that thought they were going to be the section leader, but they're not for some reason? Well, it may or may not emerge as you get together. Hopefully it won't. But sometimes people who are like that can be difficult because they wanted to be the section leader, but they're not the section leader, and they're angry about that, or they're hostile about it. They're going to do things that might make your job more difficult. Well, how do you handle that? Is it possible that this person, even though they're not a section leader, might be able to do something better than you could do it? That was absolutely the case for me my sophomore year in college. When I was named the section leader of the baritone section, I went to Auburn. I was in the Auburn band, and I was named section leader, much to the surprise of the fifth-year senior first-chair wind ensemble player. I was a sophomore, thought I had it all figured out. And so, but Tim, his name was Tim, and Tim was not happy about this at all. And one day during band camp, Tim came in late to a rehearsal. We had this thing back when I was in the band at Auburn, that if you came in late for rehearsal, you put your horn down at the gate and you took a lap around the field as your own self-inflicted punishment for being late to rehearsal. It's just what you did. Nobody asked you to do it. It's like, crap, I'm late. put your horn down, take a lap, pick up your horn, run to your spot, and you're in rehearsal. That was it. Nobody got after you. Nobody fussed at you. You didn't get like a lower grade or anything. It's just what you did. So Tim comes in, and he's just kind of moseying on to the section rehearsal. Didn't put his horn down. Didn't take a lap. And so I, in my infinite 19-year-old wisdom, decided that this was the opportunity for me to flex my section leader muscles and let the section realize who was in charge. Tim didn't do what he was supposed to do, and I was going to call him on it. And so I did, and then we got into a verbal altercation right there in front of the section, in front of everybody. In fact, it got to the point that the band director had to come over and step in. I saw him coming up, and I thought, well, good, he's going to set this right, and we're going to be good. Well, what he did is he walked over, and he sent Tim away, and he started chewing me out. And I was really surprised. I was kind of taken aback by that. Like, wait a minute, I didn't come in late. He did. He said, what are you doing? And I said, well, he's supposed to take a lap. He said, forget that. Forget about it. Why are you handling it this way? I said, blah, blah, blah. And he said, stop. Here's what you're doing wrong. You're trying to be the boss of Tim. But what you need to do is give Tim something to do. Well, that kind of brought my ego back a little bit. And later on in the week, we were in a sectional, and we were practicing this part in the music that nobody in the section could play very well, including me as the section leader. And so what I did was I asked Tim, because he was the first chair player in the wind ensemble, he was the best player in the section. I said, hey, Tim, would you come up here, please, and play that passage for us so that we can hear it played correctly? And he did. He picked up his horn, he came up, and he played it, whatever it was. He played it perfectly the first time because that's what he did. I said, would you play it again? He played it again. Play one more time. Let's all practice it together. And then that was it. And that's all it took. For the rest of the time, that whole year, and then the next year, and every other year we were in band together, Tim and I no longer had a conflict. We were no longer at odds with each other. Why? Because I found something for Tim to do. I acknowledged his role. I would love to say that I came to this on my own because of my maturity and my understanding of psychology and how people work. No, somebody had to beat it into me. But in retrospect, that's what it was. I acknowledged that Tim had a role that he could play. And I wasn't afraid for him to do it because I knew he was better than I was. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. In your own section, look for those people in your section. If you think they might be problematic, head it off and say in a private conversation, you know what? There's something here that I would really like for you to do for the section. Would you consider doing this, this, or this? And now all of a sudden we don't have a problem. Because it's like, oh, I was ready to be all mad about this, but you're going to ask me to do something. Thank you. Don't be afraid as a leader to acknowledge the role that other people play. The next thing, a leader must be committed to the organization. A lot of people are involved in the organization, right? But what does it take to be committed? What's the difference? What's the difference between those two things? Are you, as a leader, are you involved in the group, or are you committed? For you, it's probably both. Being committed to something is an extra level of involvement. People who are involved come through the door, do their job, and leave. That's not what you do. You come early, you come through the door, you do your job, you stay late. You ask, is there anything else I can do before I go? That's an example of commitment. You also see commitment in breakfast food, of all places. Right? There's a chicken If it lays an egg, that means that chicken is involved in your breakfast. Okay? But there's a pig, and you have bacon, and that pig is committed. Not just involved. Don't be afraid to be committed to your organization, not just involved. And then the last thing is that a leader helps promote an environment where excellence and greatness are the standard. Excellence and greatness. Well, greatness is hard to come by. And some of you may have heard this in other leadership things. But can anybody tell me what you think the enemy of great is? What's the enemy of great? Lazy? What else? What else? Besides lazy?
Fear.
Fear? What else? Good. Okay, so that's the answer. The other things that were mentioned were detractors from greatness. But the actual enemy of great is good. Sometimes people say the enemy of great is terrible. The enemy of great is stinks. No, those are the opposites. But the true enemy of being great, the thing that keeps organizations from being great, is they get too satisfied when they become good. Because it is a lot easier as an organization to be a bad organization and become a good organization than to be a good organization and become a great organization. Ask Nick Saban which was easier, building the Alabama football program or maintaining the Alabama football program. It's a lot harder to maintain. He turned it around pretty quick. They had one bad season and then they were rocking and rolling. And then every year the expectation gets higher and higher because you've got this level of greatness that everybody expects from Alabama football. Much more difficult. The reason we don't have more great bands is because we have a lot of bands that are good. The reason we don't have more great schools is because we're satisfied with schools that are good. Do not ever let good be your destination. It's part of the journey, but it's not the destination. Y'all are probably too young to know who Vince Lombardi was. Vince Lombardi was the head football coach of the Green Bay Packers in the 50s and 60s. And when the AFL and the NFL merged in the 60s, their championship game became known as the Super Bowl. And in recognition of the Packers winning the first Super Bowl, the trophy for the Super Bowl was named after Vince Lombardi. The winner of the Super Bowl gets the Lombardi trophy. Tough, old school coach. But this is a quote that is widely attributed to him, speaking to his team. Gentlemen, we are going to relentlessly chase perfection, knowing full well that we will never catch it because nothing is perfect. But we are going to relentlessly chase it because in the process we will catch excellence. I am not remotely interested in just being good. That's how you win a Super Bowl. You aim for perfection. You're never going to reach it. But along the way, you're going to attain excellence. But you don't ever settle for just being good. So if you're just thinking about these things and wondering, okay, how am I ever going to remember some of this? Well, in addition to writing it down, you can always remember that leadership is a race. R-A-C-E. Risk, acknowledge, commit, and excellence. Those four things. All right. We've gone at this for an hour. I want to stop and give you a break. It's 2:05. Can we take a 5-minute break maybe? You need to go to the restroom, get some water, step somewhere where you can take the mask off for a second, all that is fine. And then